How many times have you looked in the mirror and thought, what if I were different? What if I had the courage to break the rules? What if I stopped being the good guy everyone walks over? That question keeps you up at night, doesn't it? It whispers in your ear every time someone disrespects you, every time you're ignored, every time you feel like your life is passing you by and you're still just another one in the crowd. This harmless-looking man is Walter White, 50 years old, a high school chemistry teacher for decades, a devoted family man, a present husband, a man who spent his entire life following the rules, being polite, doing the right thing, a man you'd pass on the street without noticing twice. A man who seems to have accepted that greatness wasn't his destiny. And this is Heisenberg, a ruthless drug lord who dominates the Southwest meth market, a calculating killer who eliminates rivals without blinking, a brilliant manipulator who is always 3 steps ahead, the most feared man in the drug underworld, whose name is whispered with reverence and terror. The question isn't how Walter White became Heisenberg. Anyone can learn to cook drugs. Anyone can buy a gun. The question that has kept us mesmerized for 5 seasons is far more disturbing. Why does this transformation fascinate us so? Why, deep down, does a part of us secretly root for him? Why, when Walter finally explodes and shouts, "I'm the one who knocks," do we feel a dark satisfaction we'd rather not admit? Because Walter White discovered something most of us have never had the courage to admit to ourselves, that the greatest danger in a man's life is not failure. It's not poverty. It's not even death. The greatest danger is the silent resentment of unrealized potential. It's the anger that simmers for decades when you know you're capable of more, but the world insists on treating you as less. It's the daily humiliation of being the nice guy everyone walks over, and the secret fantasy of showing them who you really are. Walter White lived 50 years choking on this truth, 50 years feeling like he had a caged lion inside his chest, while the world saw only a domestic kitten. And when cancer handed him a death sentence, he finally found the courage to release the lion over the next 15 minutes. We'll delve deep into the psychology behind modern television's most disturbing transformation. We'll decode not only why Walter White became Heisenberg, but why this journey resonates so viscerally with men around the world. We'll discover why good men become monsters, and most importantly, we'll discover what this fascination reveals about the demons we all carry within. Prepare for a journey into the dark side of the male psyche. Prepare to discover truths about yourself that you may not be ready to face. Watch this scene carefully. Walter White is literally on his knees, his hands filthy, cleaning the wheels of a car. It's not just any car, it's the car of one of his own students. His students are outside, cell phones in hand, filming their humiliation to post on social media. The man who should be teaching about the elegance of chemical elements, about the laws that govern the universe, is on his hands and knees being ridiculed by teenagers who can barely pass their exams. Feel the pain of this image. You've been there, haven't you? Maybe not literally on your knees washing cars, but you know the feeling. The feeling of being small when you know you're big, of being invisible when you know you have something important to contribute, of being treated like a loser when you know, deep down, that you have the potential to be extraordinary. And here's what hurts the most. Walter White isn't a failure. He's a chemistry genius. His knowledge is vast. His intelligence is brilliant. His ability to solve complex problems is exceptional. But none of that matters in the real world, because the real world doesn't value intelligence. The real world values aggressiveness. It values self-promotion. It values the ability to assert oneself and take what's rightfully yours. Now watch this devastating scene. Walter is watching a television interview with his former partners at Gray Matter Technologies. Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz are sitting comfortably in a sleek studio, casually discussing how they built a billion-dollar empire. The company Walter helped found, the company born from his scientific genius, is now worth over $2 billion. And they speak as if Walter never existed. Imagine the searing pain of this betrayal. You create something with your own hands, with your own mind, and then it's erased from history. Your former partners not only got all the money, they got all the credit. Walter White was reduced to a footnote in his own creation. Worse still, when his name is mentioned, it's only to diplomatically downplay his contribution, as if he were a lab assistant who helped a little in the beginning. Here's the brutal truth our society doesn't want men to admit. Every man carries within him a primal need to be recognized. I'm not talking about vanity or superficial ego. I'm talking about something much deeper and more ancient. The need to know that your existence matters. To know that you left a mark on the world. To know that when you die, people will remember you with respect, not pity. Walter White lived 50 years stifling this need. 50 years being the nice guy everyone likes, but no one takes seriously. 50 years swallowing humiliations, swallowing disrespect, swallowing the constant feeling that life owed him something that never arrived. 50 years being polite, understanding, reasonable. While less intelligent and less qualified men climbed the social ladder by stepping on him. And with each humiliation, each moment of being ignored or treated as insignificant, something inside him grew. It wasn't pure evil, it was something far more dangerous. It was hunger. Hunger for significance. Hunger for power. Hunger to finally, for the first time in his life, truly matter. This hunger lies dormant for years, sometimes decades, but it never dies. It just waits for the right opportunity to awaken. If you're watching this video this far, it's because you recognize this hunger within you. You know exactly what I'm talking about because you felt it growing in your chest. Maybe it's when your boss treats you like a number. Maybe it's when your intelligence is overlooked in favor of someone louder. Maybe it's when you see less qualified people being promoted while you remain stagnant. That hunger is there, isn't it? Whispering that you deserve more, that you are capable of more, that the world hasn't yet seen what you can truly do. Walter's terminal lung cancer diagnosis isn't the villain of this story. Cancer is the liberator. Let that sink in for a moment. The death sentence was the best thing that ever happened to Walter White, because it finally gave him something he'd never had permission to stop being polite for 5 decades. Walter lived imprisoned by what society expected of him. Be a good teacher, be a good husband, be a good father, don't cause trouble, don't be aggressive, don't demand what's yours, accept what life offers you and be grateful for it. But when you have 18 months to live, these societal rules suddenly lose all power over you. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, there is a fundamental concept called the call to adventure. It's the moment when life forces you to abandon who you've always been and become who you truly are. It's not a conscious choice, it's an irresistible psychic compulsion. The hero can no longer continue living the small, safe life they once knew. Something within them awakens and demands a radical transformation. Pay close attention to Walter's body language in this first scene in the makeshift desert laboratory. He's not nervous in the way you'd expect from a middle-aged chemistry professor entering the world of crime. His hands don't tremble when he handles the equipment. His voice doesn't waver as he explains the process to Jesse. On the contrary, for the first time in decades, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, Walter White is completely in his element. Jung also spoke of something he called the shadow. But most people misunderstand this concept. The shadow isn't simply the evil within us. The shadow is everything we are, but that we've learned to repress. It's all the potential we deny, all the abilities we hide, all the impulses we consider inappropriate or socially unacceptable, Walter's predatory intelligence was always there. His manipulative ability was always there. His fierce ambition was always there. His thirst for control and domination was always there. Society simply taught him that these qualities were bad, so he spent 50 years constructing a nice teacher persona to hide his true nature. When Walter chooses the name Heisenberg for his criminal identity, he's doing much more than simply creating an alias. Heisenberg was a German physicist famous for the uncertainty principle, the idea that you can't simultaneously know both the exact position and velocity of a particle. Walter is telling the world, you can't know me completely. You can't predict me. I'm uncertain, dangerous, and untraceable. But Heisenberg represents something even deeper in Walter's psyche. Heisenberg isn't a mask he wears. Heisenberg is who Walter has always been beneath the surface. The scientific genius he used to teach uninterested teenagers basic chemistry is the same genius he now uses to create the purest methamphetamine on the market. The obsession with precision that led him to correct schoolwork with red pen is the same obsession he now applies to eliminating rivals and expanding territory. And here lies the most revealing moment of the entire series, the foreshadowing that defines not only who Walter has become, but who he has always been. I am the one who knocks at the door. This isn't just a threat to Skylar to stop worrying about her safety. This is Walter White finally, for the first time in his adult life, admitting his true nature. For decades, he was the man waiting for something bad to happen to him, waiting to be fired, waiting to be humiliated, waiting to be forgotten, waiting for a life to pass him by without leaving a mark. But now, he's the force that makes things happen. He no longer waits for fate, he creates it. He no longer fears danger, he is the danger. People don't knock on his door with bad intentions because they know that if they do, it could be the last door they ever knock on. This journey was never really about earning money to leave to his family after his death. It was about a 50-year-old man finally discovering and embracing his own power. It was about stopping apologizing for existing and starting to make the world acknowledge his existence. Now I'm going to teach you something that most psychologists don't fully understand. And that explains not only the Walter White tragedy, but a psychological epidemic that's quietly occurring in our society. Something that could be happening to you right now, without you even realizing it. Carl Jung identified an extremely dangerous psychological phenomenon he called psychic inflation. This occurs when an ego that has spent its entire life feeling small and insignificant suddenly comes into direct contact with a power archetype, in this case, the tyrannical shadow, without having developed the emotional maturity, moral structure, and self-awareness necessary to integrate it. HEALTHILY. Imagine this for 50 years. Walter White identified with the good man archetype, humble, polite, self-sacrificing, always putting others first. But this archetype was suffocating his soul because it wasn't genuine. It was a social performance he maintained because it was what was expected of him. When Walter finally comes into contact with his true power archetype, what we might call the Dark King or dangerous wizard, he doesn't gradually learn to use that power wisely. Instead, he's instantly possessed by it. Consider this scene. Walter is literally practicing being Heisenberg in the mirror. He's not just assuming a false identity to protect himself, he's falling in love with the feeling of being feared. Here's the knowledge conventional therapists don't want you to know. When a man spends decades of his life feeling powerless, inadequate, and disrespected, his first true taste of real power is like psychological heroin. He doesn't just want a little, he wants an overdose. He doesn't just want to be respected, he wants to be feared. He doesn't just want to be recognized, he wants to be adored. Psychic inflation occurs when we lose the ability to distinguish between this power and this power. Walter White never learned to channel his intelligence, ambition, and manipulative abilities for constructive purposes. Instead, he began to believe he was literally a born criminal genius, an invincible strategist, almost a deity in his domain. Observe how Walter manipulates every person in his life. He doesn't just do it when necessary to protect his business, he does it because he's become addicted to the feeling of control. When he manipulates Jesse, he's not just keeping his partner in line, he's proving to himself that he's smarter. When he lies to Skylar, he's not just protecting secrets, he's demonstrating intellectual superiority. When he deceives Hank, he's not just avoiding capture, he's delighting in outwitting a seasoned federal agent. And here's the most dangerous part of psychic inflation. When you completely identify with a power archetype, you progressively lose the ability to see the real consequences of your actions. You lose genuine empathy for the people you're hurting. You lose connection with your own humanity. Walter White genuinely believed he was doing everything for the family, even when his actions were methodically destroying every relationship that mattered to him. This is the hallmark of psychic inflation. You become completely blind to the reality of who you've become. And that's exactly why good men become monsters. Not because they wake up one day and decide to be evil, but because they become addicted to finally feeling powerful, important, respected, and completely lose track of where the line is between using power and abusing it. Now, we come to the most psychologically devastating moment in the entire Breaking Bad series. A scene that lasts less than 3 minutes but reveals decades of psychological transformation. A scene that many men watch and feel a shiver of recognition they'd rather not admit. Walter White is in the middle of the desert with Mike and Jesse, negotiating with a rival distributor. The man refuses to accept Walter's terms and threatens to leave. And then Walter does something that changes everything. He doesn't beg, he doesn't negotiate, he doesn't offer concessions. Instead, he approaches and, with a deadly calm that makes the desert air seem icy, asks a simple question. State my name. Look at Walter's eyes when he asks this question. There's no trace of the shy chemistry teacher left. No more insecurity. No more the man who silently accepted disrespect. There's only an absolutely primal need to be recognized for who he's become, not for who society wants him to be. Heisenberg. You are sure, at that very moment, Walter White dies psychologically. What remains walking in that desert is no longer a man struggling to balance his dual identity. It's merely the inflated shadow, completely addicted to its own power, unable to return to its former life because that former life now feels like a living death. Now, I need you to mentally pause everything that's happening around you and be brutally honest with yourself. I'm going to ask you a question, and how you answer will reveal something fundamental about your psyche. In what area of your life do you secretly seek power to compensate for a deep sense of powerlessness? Yes, don't answer quickly. Really think. Because we all have this area. We all have that psychological territory where we feel small, where we feel disrespected, where we fantasize about the day we'll show our true strength. Is it at work? Where you spend hours imagining the moment you'll confront your boss and show who you really are. Where you fantasize about the day your colleagues will finally recognize your intellectual superiority. Is it in a relationship where you keep a mental file of all the times you've been disrespected, all the times your contributions have been minimized, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back and prove your worth? Is it online, on social media or in forums, where you can be more aggressive, more intelligent, more respected than you can be in real life, where you can finally be the version of yourself you always knew existed? Or maybe it's something more subtle. Maybe it's the way you drive in traffic, where you become inexplicably aggressive. Maybe it's the way you treat people in positions of service, where you can finally exert authority. Maybe it's the way you argue about politics or religion, where you can demonstrate intellectual superiority, The uncomfortable truth that we all have an inner Heisenberg waiting for the opportunity to emerge. The crucial question is, will you let this power completely possess you, as it did with Walter? Or will you learn to integrate it in a mature and constructive way? Walter chose total possession, and now we'll see exactly where the choice led him, and what we can learn from his tragedy. Look carefully at where Walter White's epic journey ends. He has achieved everything he ever wanted. He holds absolute power in his domain. His name is whispered with reverence and terror throughout the American Southwest. No one dares challenge him directly. His intelligence is finally recognized and respected. He has built an empire that generates millions of dollars. He has become exactly what he fantasized about being during 50 years of humiliation, and he is dying completely alone, in an abandoned laboratory, surrounded only by the machines that represent his only remaining genuine relationship. Take me back to the first scene of the series. Walter is being humiliated at the car wash, but look round him. Skylar is worried about his dignity. Walt Jr. still sees him as a flawed hero, but a hero nonetheless. Hank teases him, but with brotherly affection. His students may not respect him, but at least they know his name. He's surrounded by people who, despite all their imperfections and frustrations, represent real human connections. Now he's a king of an empty kingdom. Skylar hates and fears him. Walt Jr. changed his name so he wouldn't carry his father's identity. Hank is dead because of him. Jesse despises him more than anything in the world. He has no friends, no true allies, no one who cares whether he lives or dies. The elixir Heisenberg promised wasn't freedom, it was a golden prison forged by his own need for power. Walter traded his humanity for a sense of importance. He traded genuine love for a fear-based respect. He traded authentic connections for manipulative control. And here lies perhaps the most disturbing truth of the entire series. During the moments when Walter was exercising his power manipulating impossible situations, besting more experienced adversaries, proving his intellectual superiority, he was genuinely, viscerally happy in a way he had never experienced in 5 decades of normal life. This shows us something deeply uncomfortable about human nature. The need for power, meaning, and recognition is not evil in itself. It is fundamentally human. It is legitimate. The problem rises when we try to satisfy this need through domination and destruction rather than creation and constructive contribution. Walter White discovered that he would rather be feared and hated than ignored and disrespected. He would rather die a lonely king than live as an insignificant subject. This is a truth many men secretly acknowledge, but would never admit aloud. Remember the pain we felt when we saw Walter being humiliated at the car wash. Remember the anger we felt when his former partners erased his contribution from Grey Matter's history. That pain and anger were real. They were valid. The problem wasn't Walter feeling those emotions. The problem was how he chose to deal with them, instead of using his pain as motivation to create something genuinely valuable. He used it as justification to destroy, instead of channeling his intelligence into constructive contributions that would naturally generate the respect he craved. He perverted it into domination and manipulation. Walter White shows us what happens when you feed your shadow the wrong energy. Instead of becoming more whole and integrated, you become less human and more monstrous. Let me give you the sentence that sums up Walter White's entire psychological tragedy. It wasn't cancer that killed Walter White. It was the cure he found. For 50 years, Walter believed his problem was powerlessness, so he became all-powerful. He believed his problem was being ignored, so he became impossible to ignore. He believed his problem was a lack of control over his own life, so he controlled and manipulated absolutely everything around him. But Walter White never became whole. He never integrated the different parts of his personality in a mature and balanced way. Instead, he simply changed his mask. He shed the mask of the good, powerless man and donned the mask of the powerful monster. At no point in the series did he manage to be simultaneously powerful and compassionate, intelligent and wise, respected and loved. The truth that Breaking Bad reveals about human nature is this: the opposite of a good man is not a monster. It's a whole man. A man who recognizes and accepts his capacity for both creation and destruction, for both love and anger, for both compassion and relentless strength, and who consciously chooses, moment by moment, how to use these strengths. Walter White could have used his scientific genius to revolutionize education. He could have channeled his ambition into building something genuinely valuable. He could have transformed his pain into wisdom, his anger into constructive motivation, his need for recognition into contributions that would naturally generate the respect he sought. Instead, he showed us the tragedy of being consumed by the shadow. He showed us the devastating price of seeking power through destruction rather than creation, through domination rather than contribution. Walter White's journey is a dark mirror for every man who has ever felt undervalued, disrespected, or ignored. It's a warning about what happens when our legitimate need for a meaning and recognition is perverted by impatience, resentment, and a thirst for revenge against a world that hasn't given us what we thought we deserved. If you identified with Walter White's pain and if you've made it this far in the video, you definitely have the question isn't how to avoid having a shadow. We all have one. The question is, how will you choose to embrace it? How will you transform your anger into determination? How will you channel your ambition into purposes that not only elevate you, but genuinely contribute to the world? Is this integration possible? Is it possible to master our inner darkness and use it for good? Is it possible to be simultaneously powerful and compassionate? Is it possible to wear the mask of the monster not to destroy, but to protect? If this video touched something deep inside you, if you recognized your own hunger for power and meaning in Walter White's choices, please like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what is your biggest fear about your own potential for power? What would you do if you had the opportunity to finally show the world who you truly are? Because the journey of true self-discovery begins when we stop running from who we are and begin consciously choosing who we want to become. Walter White showed us the dark path. Batman will show us the path of light through the darkness. Your shadow is waiting. The question is, will you be possessed by it? Or will you learn to dance with it?